Morning, everybody from everywhere. Anyway, this is webinar number 46, but it is Uncle Pete's Corner number 1. So, what are you talking about today? What's this open source default manager class?
Exactly. We're gonna, we've started the open source initiative, and at the end of the webinar, I'm going to give you guys some pretty exciting news on the open source initiative. But this is kind of an introductory into what the open source initiative is, how to use it. We're going to pull one of the easiest pieces out of it, the default manager class, put it into one of the WINDEV examples, kind of give you some examples of how to use the open source project, what it can do for you. You know, it's all about not not reinventing the wheel for stuff that we've worked out and created foundational code for you. And you know, you find additions, changes to it. That's the whole point of open source, is to contribute back. Uh, a lot of folks have asked me, why I'm doing open source. It's pretty simple. I was a third-party developer back in the day with Clarion. Never ever want to be a third-party developer again. Yeah, software developers are horrible, horrible people to support. We're we're cheap. We expect 24/7 support, and well, let's just say it's rough. So instead, I think I'll just pay it forward with doing my stuff open source. And if you see something you like but need it expanded, need help on a project, maybe some of my open source code convinces you that I'm the right guy to help you out on your projects or what have you. And that's I am a contractor. I make my living contracting, so I I do need to get paid one day. So it's all about sharing and seeing where it goes. So anyway, that's what the open source initiative is. We're going to start out. There's a couple of ways you can get the open source code. The easiest way is to go to my blog. It's also up on the WinDev repository, but the latest and greatest one will always be on the blog. Uh, we're also going to very shortly have a alpha version that you can pull from the SCM, but the most recent released version will always be in this blog article. If you go to my the next stage WordPress blog and go to the open source category, you'll see all the different bits and pieces, but the one that says open source application has everything in it. And at the bottom of that, there is a download that you can pull down, and I've already pulled it down this morning. Just save that off. It's a zip file. Just save that off somewhere. And then when you come over to the IDE, what that zip file is it was created with the save the project feature of the IDE. Don't know if any of you guys have used this feature or not yet, but it makes a complete zip file backup of your project with all of its bits and pieces, so that if you need to share your project with someone other than via an SCM, one of the places I use this constantly is when I'm sending bug reports to tech support and they ask for a sample project. Save the project is how I zip those up to send them to them. So all you do is choose the restore project. I pointed it to the zip file I just downloaded. And now it wants to know where I want my project to be. Now this one tricked me the first time. I assumed that it was going to create a directory under this directory. It does not. So don't just select my projects here. Go out and create a folder under my projects to put it in. Otherwise, you'll wind up with it in your root my projects folder. And you're done.
Like, oops, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just like that, you now have.
By the way, nice blog. And
In,
I know it's a lot of work too. And so, good job.
you know, it's one of those things, just like the webinars. It enforces a lot of code review, and you know, it's beneficial not only to folks reading it, at least I hope it is, but it's also beneficial to me. It's a good exercise that I encourage anyone and everyone to try. So now that we restored that project from the ID, you can open projects, and as you see, my projects, next stage open source was where we saved it. We come down to the project file, open it, and here's all the windows, the classes, queries, everything is in here. And we can run the project. It has demo files with it in that zip file. So there's demonstrations of most of the features like QBE, lookups, what have you. So the security classes are here. All the bits and pieces of my open source code are all included, including the business rule editor. So this gives you a way to kind of play around with the features, see how I put the features together. There's the calls to the Browse Form Manager. Like I said, the one we're going to use today is the default manager class. And there it is. So one of the first things to know, I may have just made the IDE mad.
When does that happen? When you move too fast?
I'm not sure. That one was a little odd. It does crash on me occasionally. The nice thing is I've never had it corrupt a project or anything, though.
That's good.
Yeah, a repair project or whatever always seems to get me back to where I was without any permanent damage. One of the things I was going to show you is in this project, there's a documents folder, and the documentation for each of the classes is included as PDF files. Now they're also in that project directory, literally in that documents directory, but you can open them right from the IDE. So that's also a handy way if you've got a specs document for your project, add it to your project file, check it in with the SCM, and then all your developers have access to it from right over here. All right, so now
That's a
we've
good idea.
downloaded.
Huh?
Yeah, it's handy. I mean, it's you know, the layers of this IDE just keep giving. So now we have our project open, our open source. We've downloaded it, we opened it, we saw it working. Let's put some of the bits and pieces into one of our own projects. All right, what I just did was I moved that IDE over to one of my other screens. One of the things I love about WINDEV is the ability to open multiple copies of the ID at one time. And we're going to open the CRM project. This is one of the examples that comes with WINDEV. Okay. And the first thing we're going to do is we need to, that default manager, if you read the documentation, there are a few files it uses because it stores your defaults either in the database or in the registry. So it needs a file. So what I am doing, coming over here, I believe this works. I haven't actually tried this one, but there's the default manager table. Let's see if this works. Copy. Paste. Is that insane or is that insane? And now we have that table definition in the analysis of this project. We can regenerate that. We don't need to do any modifications there. So now we have the file in the analysis. Next thing we need to do is import the class. So you can come over here and say import a class and point to the Next Stage Open Source folder. And we're going to need both the default manager and we're going to need the system log class. We want to copy the files into our project directory. You can do a share so that you're actually keeping one copy, but if you're going to get into sharing and stuff, I recommend you do that via the SEM. We've talked about that before, and I suspect we probably need to revisit that sometime before too much longer for some of the new guys that have just now started looking at the SEM. So now you see we have those two classes into our project. The next piece, and I'm going to do a little cheating again, is that system log actually needs a file as well. It needs this file. So come back over, put that in the analysis. And if you read the documentation, you can change the name of these files, add fields, rename the fields, and there are properties for the classes that let you override all of that. So you're not stuck with my naming convention at all. And of course, since it is open source, you also have the ability to modify the class, but you actually don't need to modify the class if you don't want to.
Hey, how do people give you feedback if they find something that they think it's cool that they had to work on?
The best way is if you want to contribute, just get with me on Skype, email, what have you. If you come up with something where you've extended one of my classes or something, post in the comments of the related article is the best way to do that. That way the rest of the community sees the discussion, can contribute to it, that sort of thing. Okay, you see all these compile errors? Those are all complaining about the colon prefix on classes. I always have my project set where I can use the dot syntax so that I don't have to do a different syntax for class variables. And now you see all those errors went away. Again, that was over here, project description, compilation, and check classes, optional colon and colon prefixes for accessing the members and the methods. What that has to do with is inheritance, and with that off, you have to always specify the colon and the colon to tell it whether to call out of its own class or to call up to a parent class. With this checked on, it uses, to use Microsoft's word, reflection to figure out where it needs to get itself from. But you can always use the colon and colons even with that option on. Okay, so now we have the classes in, we have the files in. The next thing to do is a little bit of code in the project. And again, this stuff is all in the documentation of the class. Or we can come over here and look at project code and scroll down. And there's the setup for the default manager in this system log right there. We can just copy that right over into our project code. And that looks like the global variable they're using for user ID. So we just change it right there. And also there. And that's what I was talking about, of everything is using properties to determine variable names and so forth. And there are defaults set for a lot of these things the documentation explains. But if you're using a different variable name, it's just a matter of changing that property. So at this point, we have system log installed and we have default manager installed. You want to change where the registry is storing, and we'll put this as CRM, the name of our project. And what that's about is the default manager allows you to store in the registry or in the database, which is what that file we added was for. It gives you a lot of different layers, and I'm not going to go into them all today, but the idea is that you can have options that are global to the entire application, everyone using it. You can have options that are global to a user and follow that user from workstation to workstation. You can have options that are unique to the workstation, like last person logged on. The ones that are unique to the workstation you store in the registry. All right, so at this point we've got it plumbed in. I'm just going to run it and make sure we didn't get any kind of errors on the initiation, so we've got it all plumbed to good. And now we're going to go take a look at using one thing that I forgot to mention. There are code bricks included with the project, and this is one thing that they have not done a good job on just yet, is the ability to merge and share code bricks. I've got one of our favorite developers. I've gave him a lot of hints on a project to create a utility for that hopefully we'll see one day. But if you go into Tools, Options, General Options of the of WINDEV, Directories, Bricks of Code, there's a pointer here to code bricks. If you're not using any of your own code bricks or what have you, you can just point straight to the one that is included in the open source project you downloaded. If you are, right now the best way I've found to get bricks from one to the other is to open 2 copies of the IDE, point one to a different brick file, and then open them one by one, copy and paste the code from one to the other. It's not pretty. These are the code bricks that come with the project. So let's go over to the login window and let's look at what code they've got over here. Okay, when they initialize the login window, they're going out and getting a value from the registry for what the user is and setting some values based on that. We're going to do that same thing. We're just going to use the default manager to do it instead. So there is a default manager for save, and it's also got a shortcut of DM. Actually, the one we want right now is DM get. That will pop up. We want to put it in user. You see it's writing the statement up above here for us. This one is going to be registry, and this is where I need the documentation to see what that equate is. Registry. Default name is user, and default value doesn't look like they're putting any in there, but we're going to, so we'll leave it at 0. Okay. So that code took the place of this code. And what that call's doing is it's actually going out, querying the registry, saving the value. If it didn't have a value, it wrote a 0 out there, and now it set this to 0. You see here's another one where they're doing the memo. Now to save it, we can come over here, and this is where you start seeing a difference in the code. Let's go ahead and do this one as well. So we want to do.
It's so different to see everything start on column 1, you know.
Yeah, exactly. All right, checkbox 1. We're storing this one in the registry as well. And its name is memo. Doesn't look like it has a default value. We can actually not specify one, and we've replaced that line of code. Now where that becomes handy is you see all this code here where if they check that checkbox, we want to save some extra values out into the registry. Well, we can do that. We don't have to do this. And did you notice how I did that? And I think you've got that in 8 now. You can highlight a section or not. You got that in Clarion 8 now, Arnold?
Oh yeah, we had it in 7.
All right, so now you can do DM save. Again, it's a registry. The default name user and in user. Okay, and now we've replaced all of their registry code with Halsted default manager, and the program will work exactly the same if we log in with Carlin. I guess you gotta know Carlin's password. Bunny must be the only one that doesn't have a password. But now when it first opens up, it's going to get the default and set it, use it. So this isn't much different than using the normal registry query calls, except you don't have to worry about this managing, creating registry keys and that sort of thing. It's going to do it for you, and you've got a standard methodology of saving. Where it really comes in handy is when you also start storing values in the database so that it follows users around. And what I'm going to do now is open up my bank project. So yeah, at this point, you've seen how to pull the class down. You've seen how to pull it into a project, add the code. We have any questions with the process of starting to use some of the open source code before I move on to showing you some better examples of using the default manager?
I don't see any questions there.
All right, I put everyone to sleep already, did I?
No, Wolfgang's typing.
Or he dozed off against his keyboard?
Oh yeah, that was Andy.
Yeah, that's right. We'll take care of that later. All right, so I will close this.
I need my latte.
Open. You're running your beans for that
Ooh.
cheap grinder anyway.
That's right. I burned up my beans with my cheap grinder for $8.95.
Okay, so this is my bank app, and I wrote this thing long before I got all nice and standardized on my classes and stuff. So some of my file and field names over in that project are different than the defaults in the class. So you see in the system log, setting it up, I'm using some of those extra properties to say, you know what, in my project here, the error description field is actually called message line in the analysis. And if we come over and look at the analysis, and yes, this is a SQL server, believe it or not. Not by my choice, though.
We were gonna say.
Hey, I drug him back into it a while back. He ain't got
There's
much
my
choice
system.
right now.
There is my system log table. It doesn't match the one that's in open source, so that's why I'm using those extra properties to override the field names that the class will use. And if you want to learn the power of indirection and what it does for us, take a look at the code in that class on how I'm doing that, because everything in that class, the name of the files that it's fetching, the fields that it's using, everything is done by indirection using these properties so that you're not stuck with my file names and my field names and things like that. And I hope everyone on this list and listening today knows that we all owe Glenn a huge round of kudos for kind of forging that indirection path and getting us started down that.
Yeah, he opened up a door
So
that he did not even begin to believe how far we'd take it.
I believe that door went to Pandora's box. So now if we look at some of the code in here, this is my logon screen. And you will see where I am. I'm still doing an INI read there. Okay, I haven't pulled my default even over to use it. I think the reason I put default in here was, I'll show you the advanced version. And this is an example of what the open source initiative is all about. I posted the first version of the default manager, and Pragma took a look at it and said, well, why aren't you, supporting binaries? And I said, well, I'd be a little worried about how am I going to handle that with the registry and things like that. And he gave me some suggestions and kind of took me down that road. I'm like, well, yeah, I've never had a need for it, but we'll see. Within a week, I had a need for it. This is my print 1099 function. They are able to set all the alignment for where everything prints on that 1099 because I got tired of changing this damn program every year. Now this is something that normally, how would I have done this on a project? I would have created a database table called 1099 parameters. I would have had to add, I think there's 25 fields if I remember right. I would have had to add 25 fields to it. Anytime I wound up needing another field, I'd have to make a database change. Lots of pain to do that. So instead, I've got all of these fields in a structure. And I'm not going to get into what structures are today, but it's those of you that came from the Clarion world, it's a group. It's basically just a way to group a bunch of variables and treat them as one piece. So what I am doing is I've created a structure. I've got my defaults. That's what all these values are, is the defaults that I set up. And then I am doing a get default, which remember, the get default, if it does not find an entry, writes an entry out there with the default value. So that's the reason I did this code first. If it finds something out there already, it won't use these values. It'll use what it finds instead. So this is just a way to get the defaults out there the very first time is what this is about. So notice I'm using a different quate here. I'm using window global. That tells the default manager class that this default is associated with this specific window and it's global, which means all the users get the exact same default.
So that's where you specify the scope of this default thing?
Exactly. There are 4 scopes. There's registry, user global, window global, or user window. And that pretty much takes care of, registry is basically machine specific. User global is for something that you store for that user, not related to a specific window. Window global is like what we're looking at here. We don't need each user to have their own 1099 alignment settings. We want them all to have the exact same ones. So that's what user global is. Window global, or I'm sorry, that's what window global is. And then user window is the ultimate layer of and I'll show you where I'm using that on a lot of my report settings, although I don't know that I've incorporated it into this app fully yet.
So that's the
But
highest level.
well, I guess it depends on how you're looking at it. The either the highest level or the lowest level, it's specific to that one user on this specific window. Where I
Yeah.
use that one is report parameters, so that if I've got a report that pops up with 5 or 6 different parameters and configuration settings on it, I will use a window user global there so that it remembers those settings for that specific user. So now the next time that user runs the report, it remembers their settings. Some other user uses that report, they get a completely different set of defaults because it's remembered what they use. I use the window user for all kinds of things. On browsers, I remember what filters you've used. I remember what QBE you like to start with. We use it in our Peekaboo stuff to remember whether you like the Peekaboo form open or closed. Uh, we do all kinds of stuff like that with the default manager. And the beauty of it is we don't have to store and create database tables to do all that storing. It's one table that's just generically storing that information so that it can retrieve it. So once you've
Does that
ran
become
your
a
report,
maintenance AP? Does that become a maintenance headache, or how do you keep those clean in your apps? That default manager data.
why do I care?
You don't care. Okay.
I mean, it's default. A user leaves, a user leaves. I mean, unless I've got a couple 100,000 users, I don't see how I could ever have a performance issue with it. So, that's the whole point of the thing is not caring and not having to worry about that type of thing.
You could always set that if you
So
destroy a
when they
user, then it
run the
goes through and
report,
gets all his defaults and gets rid of them.
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Thanks.
So when you run it, it just does a DM save, saving that structure back out to the file. So now if we come over and let me run SQL Server.
I can't believe that's not Postgres.
Yeah, well, banks are, Microsoft world. What can I say? And there is the one that we stored. Notice it says window global. That is the scope that we set. That's how it finds it. And it used the window name. You didn't have to tell it the window name. It's using the WINDEV functions to figure that stuff out. The name of the specific variable. And because that was binary data, it's literally stored it as binary data in the database. So as we look through here, you see here's a user global. This user likes the print preview turned on. So when that app first loads up, when that user logs in, it sees, okay, they like the default of the print preview turned on, so now it's turned on for them. Now, because I'm doing this database wise and user global, instead of that being, the normal way you would do that is like we saw in that other application. They stored all of those in the types of things in the registry. That means it's only in the registry, it's all machine specific. As soon as I log on to a new workstation, all of my preferences just went away. With this methodology, I can go to any workstation running against this database and all of my preferences follow me around. So no matter, if I sit down at Susie's workstation and log in, it's going to know I like print preview turned on. This is what I was telling you about. That's our peekaboo states. Like for the user, I like the peekaboo to be visible. For terms, I like it to not be visible. And this is a user window one. Notice it has both the window name and the username as part of its key that I've set up. And again, you don't have to manage all this. The class manages all that for you. All you do is specify the scope and it handles everything else for you. But that's how it's managing the different storage.
Well, that's pretty cool because that's the basis of a lot of programs. If you with your default manager, you can go to town.
Yeah, exactly.
Pete,
The prime example is those 1099 parameters. That's something that I would have normally have created a table to hold that one record with those 25 values in it. Now I did no coding whatsoever. I just said save the structure.
Yeah, like user preferences or whatever. Man, you can shove it all in here.
Chris is
Yeah,
asking
and
a
I'm starting
question
to
on
use
where
it
you're
for
putting
a
the
lot of
user.
things. Yeah, the user, what I do is over in the class, and again, the class manages all this for you. What I do in the class is if it's a user window or user global, you see user global, what's in type detail is just the user ID. So that's how the class finds it. That's the user, and that's what you said the variable name is, what the default name is. If you said user window, then it set the default type, the type detail to user dash window name. So that's how it's finding it. When that window comes up, it knows what windows it's on, it knows what user is, it creates that type detail, and that's how it goes and fetches the record. And that's the reason we had the code over here in our project code. Now this will probably make a little more sense to you. Right here, we told it, what is our user ID variable? Now you know why it needs to know that, because when it's saving those user defaults, it's got to know what's the ID of the currently logged on user. So this is the global variable that holds that value. So that's where it's getting that one to write out everywhere.
So whether that's
a user ID field would again make it specific to a particular design or something. This way, you can store anything in there. You don't have to code it and have multiple fields and so forth. And everything that it's fetching, it's doing by that type detail. So as long as you have an index on type detail, you're absolutely golden.
so that could have been a GUID too, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't care if you're using username. Well, I do care, but that's a separate topic.
Something
The
unique.
class,
Yeah.
the class doesn't care if you're not using an auto numbered key. But yeah, I've worked on systems where they literally just have unique user ID names, and if that's the case, then you can actually store that and use that name instead. And of course, again, the whole point of this is open source, no black boxes here. So, if you don't like the way something in this class works, go change it. Just the only thing we ask, that's the whole point of open source. You do something cool and wonderful, share with the class. Okay. There's no more questions. Quick announcement, and then I've got to run. All right. The
Fantastic.
open source initiative right now, when I first did it, I called it the Next Stage Open Source Demo App, the Next Stage Open Source Initiative. I've got a couple other developers that are going to start contributing very shortly. We're going to release a new version. It's going to be called the WX Open Source Initiative. Andy is going to be contributing his file management classes, and at some point, we both promise you that the Browse Form Manager and the QBE and Andy's file manager classes are going to get hitched. It's just we just have not ran into the time to do that. The other exciting piece of that is not just a Pete and Andy show any longer. Pragma has joined the ranks. Some of you have seen some of the comments and different things that Pragma has started posting since we tricked him into joining us. Another very smart guy with a lot of knowledge, and he's done a tabbed interface that's much cleaner and better than the tabbed interface that I have in the Browse Form Manager, and we're marrying his tabbed interface to my Browse Form Manager, and there will be a lot of other stuff that he's going to be contributing as well. So there are three of us that are
And
at
has
this
he
point
got that
are
drag out to a
contributing
new
to
window
the
yet?
WX Open Source Initiative. Exactly. The you know, we also need to give an honorable mention to Glenn. He hasn't contributed specific code to the open source, but he was inspirational in Business Rule Manager. He was inspirational in several of the other classes, the QBE. He's he tends to poke around and come up with some ideas and keep our creative juices going. So I always like to give him a honorable mention when we're talking about what we're doing, and he makes his living on the training and so forth. So it's understandable that he doesn't necessarily contribute directly to open source, but yeah, don't forget that he is definitely part of how we've gotten to where we've gotten. And that doesn't exclude any of you.
Part of the trip.
Like I said, you come up with a great idea, let us know. Contribute. That's all I've got for this morning. The first inaugural Uncle Pete's Corner
Yay!
in the books.
Good job.
Golf clap.
Oh, that's what that was.
I don't care what you think.
Okay.
They have medicine.
Well, that's fantastic, man.
Yeah, they do.
So everybody should know that the Uncle Pete's Corners every week, every Friday about the same time.
Every Friday morning.
We're gonna start on time, aren't we? Pete? We're not gonna wait.
Exactly,
That
because
depend on
see,
you, Arnold.
I'm already late for work this morning.
Hey, I was here.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's all right.
Cut it to the wire,
Okay.
though.
Blame me, Pete.
Well, thanks.
Blame me, Pete. Your boss knows me.
He's used to me never showing up on
Okay.
time. I've trained him well.
So,
Y'all be good if we get at it.
Do you have a saying? There you go. So that means the recording goes off right now.